What are some of the most disturbing Wikipedia pages to read? Jairgjich's execution was ducking brutal. He was captured after the battle, and condemned to sit on a smoldering, heated iron throne and forced to wear a heated iron crown and scepter, mocking his ambition to be king. While he was suffering, a procession of 9 fellow rebels who had been starved beforehand were led to this throne. In the lead was Ch's younger brother, Jurjli, who was cut in 3 despite Ch asking for Jurjli to be spared. Next, executioners removed some pliers from a fire and forced them into Ch's skin. After tearing his flesh, the remaining rebels were ordered to bite spots where the hot pliers had been inserted and to swallow the flesh. The 3 or 4 who refused were simply cut up, prompting the others to comply. In the end, Ch died from the ordeal, while the rebels who obeyed were released and left alone. Peter Scully. When a country tries to reinstate the death penalty just so it can execute one guy, you know that guy's not very pleasant. Edit, seriously, guys, this is not a pleasant read. Armin Meiwes, the German cannibal who killed and ate a voluntary victim, Bernd Brands. The Wikipedia article goes into explicit detail, including how before finally killing Brands, Meiwes cut off his victim's penis and cooked it up so they could eat it together, but Brands couldn't eat it due to being weakened by blood loss and the fact that it was too chewy. The whole page is nightmare fuel. Meiwes has since become a vegetarian. Thought you were joking, but yup, there it is. N.wikipedia.org. He ate a meal intended for 15 people in a single sitting, ate live cats, snakes, lizards and puppies, and swallowed eels whole without chewing. Despite his unusual diet, he was of normal size and appearance, and showed no signs of mental illness other than what was described as an apathetic temperament, attempted to drink the blood of other patients in the hospital and to eat the corpses in the hospital morgue. After being suspected of eating a toddler, he was ejected from the hospital. The list of youngest birth mothers. It really gives you faith in humanity when you realize that a girl was a grandmother by 17. E.S. June and Jennifer Gibbons. June Gibbons, born April 11, 1963, and Jennifer Gibbons, April 11, 1963, March 9, 1993, were identical twins who grew up in Wales. They became known as the Silent Twins since they only communicated with each other. They began writing works of fiction but later turned to crime. According to Wallace, the girls had a long-standing agreement that if one died, the other must begin to speak and live a normal life. During their stay in the hospital, they began to believe that it was necessary for one of them to die, and after much discussion, Jennifer agreed to make the sacrifice of her life. In March 1993, the twins were transferred from Broadmoor to the more open Caswell Clinic in Bridgend, Wales. On arrival, Jennifer could not be roused. She was taken to the hospital where she died soon after of acute myocarditis, a sudden inflammation of the heart. There was no evidence of drugs or poison in her system, and her death remains a mystery. At the inquest, June revealed that Jennifer had been acting strangely for about a day before their release. Her speech had been slurring, and she had said that she was dying. On the trip to Caswell, she had slept in June's lap with her eyes open. On a visit a few days later, Wallace recounted that June was in a strange mood. She said, "I'm free at last, liberated, and at last Jennifer has given up her life for me. I think the weirdest part for me is the fact that she went on to live a normal, healthy life. Especially after all that magic pack talk." N.wikipedia.org. N.wikipedia.org. A lot of these are really ducked. The worst I think is when they fed 73 mentally disabled children oatmeal with radioactive calcium in it and told the children they were joining a science club. Also, it was sponsored by Quaker Oats. Edit, thank you for the gold, I am glad others have morbid curiosities like me. In 1874, Mary Rafferty, an Irish servant woman, came to Dr. Roberts Bartholow of the Good Samaritan Hospital in Cincinnati for treatment of her cancer. Seeing a research opportunity, he cut open her head and inserted needle electrodes into her exposed brain matter. 11 He described the experiment as follows: when the needle entered the brain substance, she complained of acute pain in the neck. In order to develop more decided reactions, the strength of the current was increased, her countenance exhibited great distress, and she began to cry. Very soon, the left hand was extended as if in the act of taking hold of some object in front of her, the arm presently was agitated with clonic spasm, her eyes became fixed, with pupils widely dilated, lips were blue and she frothed at the mouth, her breathing became stertorous, she lost consciousness and was violently convulsed on the left side. The convulsion lasted 5 minutes, and was succeeded by a coma. She returned to consciousness in 20 minutes from the beginning of the attack, and complained of some weakness and vertigo. Dr. Bartholow's research report 11 What the actual duck. Neat. Dr. Bartholo. Junko Furuta's murder. This shit left me quite disturbed and disgusted for days, thanks to Reddit. Carl Tonsler n.wikipedia.org. This man dug up a victim he was treating and lived with the corpse. Upload.wikimedia.org. This is the corpse he slept beside, it's nightmare fuel in itself. I ain't clicking that shit. It's not that scary emo, kinda goofy looking actually. She looks like a papier-mâché doll of some kind, not at all like how she looks on the pictures of her when she was alive. She was quite beautiful. It basically is papier-mâché, he kept repairing her as she decayed. Okay, what the duck? I don't want to read the article now, but I also do. Fuck you, morbid curiosity. n.m.wikipedia.org. Jeannie was a child who was raised in confinement, strapped to a chair toilet with no human contact or any sort of stimulation for the first 13 years of her life. Her abusive father fed her and kept her living until she was found and rescued by the police. She is a person who linguists have researched to understand language acquisition, as she never learned any form of communication from the severe neglect she suffered. A friend of mine lived in a foster home for abused children. She told me of one of her brothers who had been locked in a room by his mother for many years. He would hit women, including my friend, right in the crotch. It doesn't take much of an imagination to guess why he hated that part of women. My neighbors adopted a girl with fetal alcohol spectrum who had been severely neglected by her parents and then foster parents previously. She knew 4 words. Her own name, no, and thank you, which she believed meant give me, so she would hold her hands out and say thank you. Edit to add, she was 4.5 years old. The Byford Dolphin Diving Bell Accident. NBSP, subsequent investigation by forensic pathologists determined that Hellevick, being exposed to the highest pressure gradient, and in the process of moving to secure the inner door, was forced through the 60 cm, 24 in, diameter opening created by the jammed interior trunk door by escaping air and violently dismembered, including bisection of his thoraco-abdominal cavity, which further resulted in expulsion of all of the internal organs of his chest and abdomen, except the trachea and a section of small intestine, and of the thoracic spine. These were projected some distance, one section later being found 10 meters, 30 feet, vertically above the exterior pressure door. I read it, and then read it again, and I still don't think I've processed anything. I worked on an accidental death case where a guy had a huge piece of equipment drop on him during an industrial accident. His midsection was flattened, and most of his internal organs had been squished out of his body through his mouth. I've been on this thread for 3 minutes, and I think that's perfectly enough time. https://n.m.wikipedia.org. Wikipedia. Before his head was placed on the guillotine, Curtin turned to the psychiatrist and asked, "Tell me, after my head is chopped off, will I still be able to hear, at least for a moment, the sound of my own blood gushing from the stump of my neck? That would be the pleasure to end all pleasures." Dude had a thoroughly unhealthy obsession with blood. I recommend his episode of the podcast Serial Killers. Actually, any of their episodes, the whole series is interesting. And sometimes it has amusing, jarring moments. Carol had met the man who would lead her down a path of kidnap, murder and necrophilia. And now for a word from our sponsors about leggings. n.wikipedia.org. A man imprisoned a woman for 24 years at his basement. They had 7 children. 3 were kept downstairs, 1 died just a few days after birth, and 3 were raised as foundlings by him and his wife. The saddest part is that woman is his daughter. And the wife didn't know anything about his doings. n.wikipedia.org. The murder of Kelly Ann Bates is a horrific way to die, and the fact he actually denied murdering her. Edit, a series called Britain's Darkest Taboos has an episode covering this also for those wondering. Okay, I thought denied murdering her as in he was arrested on suspicion of being the perpetrator, but denied it. Not he walked into a police station and claimed that he accidentally drowned his girlfriend in the bathtub during an argument. Scalding to her buttocks and left leg burns on her thigh caused by the application of a hot iron, a fractured arm, multiple stab wounds caused by knives, forks and scissors, stab wounds inside her mouth, crush injuries to both hands, mutilation of her ears, nose, eyebrows, mouth, lips and genitalia, wounds caused by a spade and pruning shears, both eyes gouged out, later stab wounds to the empty eye sockets, partial scalping. Oops. Both eyes gouged out, later stab wounds to the empty eye sockets. Most of the time when people say you can't write this or you can't make this stuff up, it's an exaggeration. But this is, duck dude. This list of unusual deaths should keep you up at night. End.wikipedia.org. 18-something, Clement Vallandigham, a lawyer and Ohio politician defending a man accused of murder, accidentally shot himself while demonstrating how the victim might have accidentally shot himself. His client was cleared. Well, he makes a good point. Very dedicated attorney too. That's very good.